Kevin never expected his relationship with Jason to evolve into something so charged, so dangerously intimate. When Jason married his mother, he had been a source of quiet strength, a man who commanded attention without demanding it. At 42, he carried himself with effortless confidence, his broad shoulders and salt and pepper hair giving him an air of authority that made Kevin's pulse quicken in ways he refused to acknowledge. For years, their relationship had been simple. Jason was the protector, the provider, the unwavering presence Kevin needed after his mother's death. But somewhere between shared late-night conversations and the way Jason's deep voice filled the empty house, something had shifted. It was the stolen moments, the way Jason's hand would linger on Kevin's lower back as they walked side by side, the way their eyes would meet across the dinner table and hold just a second too long. Kevin would catch himself watching Jason move, his muscles flexing beneath fitted shirts, his sharp jawline shadowed with stubble in the early mornings. Desire simmered beneath the surface, unspoken but undeniable. Jason was off limits, forbidden, and yet, when Kevin lay awake at night, his body aching with longing, he knew the line between them was already beginning to blur. The storm outside was relentless, rain hammering against the windows as thunder growled in the distance. The house, usually a place of quiet normalcy, now felt different, charged, intimate. Kevin sat on the couch, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his glass. Jason had poured them each a drink, a rare moment of indulgence, and the amber liquid burned warm in Kevin's throat. Across from him, Jason sat relaxed, one arm draped over the back of the couch, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, exposing just a hint of the strong chest Kevin had tried so hard not to notice. "You've been quiet tonight," Jason observed, his voice smooth but laced with something unreadable. "Something on your mind?" Kevin exhaled, his heart pounding. He had spent months trying to suppress these thoughts, bury them beneath excuses and denial. But tonight, in the flickering candlelight, with the scent of whiskey and rain thick in the air, the weight of it all was unbearable. "I've been thinking a lot about us," Kevin admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Jason's expression flickered, understanding, hesitation, something else entirely. He set his glass down slowly, his movements measured. "What about us?" he asked, his tone careful. Kevin forced himself to meet his gaze. "Sometimes, it feels like there's more here than we want to admit." A crack of thunder shook the house, but the tension between them was louder. Jason didn't move, but Kevin could see it in his eyes. He felt it too. The silence between them stretched long, thick with unspoken truths and forbidden possibilities. Jason's fingers curled around the armrest, knuckles widening slightly, his steady breaths the only thing grounding Kevin in the moment. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm raging inside him, inside both of them. Jason stood abruptly, running a hand through his dark, slightly disheveled hair, his broad shoulders tense beneath the fabric of his shirt. He moved toward the window, staring out at the downpour as if searching for answers beyond the glass. "Kevin," he began, voice rough, uncertain, "you know this isn't something we can just say out loud and make real. It's not that simple." Kevin swallowed hard and rose to his feet, closing the space between them until he could feel the warmth radiating from Jason's body. His pulse hammered in his throat, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "It is that simple," he countered, searching Jason's face for something, permission, maybe, or just the smallest crack in his resolve. "I know what I feel. And I think you do too." Jason let out a slow breath, his steel blue eyes locking onto Kevin's. "It doesn't matter what I feel," he murmured, almost to himself. "It doesn't change the fact that this could ruin everything." Kevin's fingers brushed against Jason's wrist, a feather-light touch that sent an undeniable current between them. "Then why haven't you let go?" Jason didn't answer. He didn't move, but he didn't pull away either. The air inside the house grew heavier in the days that followed. Thick with tension neither of them acknowledged but both felt pressing against their skin. Jason had been more distant, throwing himself into work and avoiding long conversations, as if staying busy would smother whatever had sparked that night. But Kevin wasn't naive. He saw the way Jason's eyes lingered too long, the way his hands clenched into fists when Kevin got too close. The way his voice softened when he said his name, as though fighting something he didn't want to admit. It was during one of their routine weekend hikes that the dam finally cracked. The sky was clear, the forest dense and secluded, their only company the rustling leaves and distant birds. They had walked in silence for nearly an hour, the unspoken stretching between them, until Kevin, unable to bear it any longer, stepped in front of Jason, stopping him mid-stride. "Tell me," Kevin demanded, chest rising and falling from more than just the exertion. "If it doesn't mean anything, if it's not real, why do you keep looking at me like that?" Jason exhaled sharply, his gaze flickering with something raw, something Kevin had seen in flashes but never fully grasped. "Because I can't stop," Jason admitted, voice low, almost a growl, "and that scares the hell out of me." Kevin took a step closer. "Then don't fight it." For the first time, Jason didn't move away. He let the moment stretch, heavy and dangerous, and then, he reached for Kevin. The first time Jason let himself cross the line. It wasn't planned, it was instinct. Hunger. Something far deeper than logic. It happened late one evening, long after dinner, when Kevin lingered too close in the kitchen, his body warm from the summer heat, his lips slightly parted as he sipped from his glass. Jason had been trying, desperately, to ignore the growing tension between them. But Kevin made it impossible. Every glance, every casual touch that lasted a second too long, every unspoken challenge in those stormy eyes unraveled Jason's restraint thread by thread. "You're avoiding me," Kevin murmured, setting his glass down with a deliberate slowness. "You think if you push me away hard enough, this will disappear." Jason clenched his jaw, but he couldn't deny it. He had spent weeks convincing himself that this was nothing, that whatever this was between them would pass if ignored long enough. But the way Kevin was looking at him now, steady and unflinching, shattered that lie. "You need to stop," Jason warned, though his voice lacked conviction. Kevin smirked. "Then tell me to go." Jason didn't. He couldn't. Instead, before he could stop himself, his fingers curled around the back of Kevin's neck, pulling him in, tasting the warmth of his lips in a desperate, reckless kiss. Kevin melted into him, hands gripping Jason's waist like he had been waiting for this, aching for it. The moment was fire and surrender, a secret neither of them could take back. The secrecy became intoxicating. Every moment they spent apart heightened the tension, turning stolen glances into silent promises, casual touches into electric confessions. In public, they maintained the illusion, Kevin, the dutiful stepson, and Jason, the responsible guardian, but behind closed doors, their reality was far more complicated, far more dangerous. Late nights turned into whispered conversations under dim lighting. Jason sitting at the edge of Kevin's bed, rubbing his temple as if trying to erase the thoughts that had taken root. Kevin, stretched out beneath him, watched with the quiet confidence of someone who had already made his choice. "You keep pretending this will stop," Kevin murmured, his fingers tracing the back of Jason's hand, his touch light, teasing, "But we both know better." Jason exhaled sharply, his head tilting back, eyes closing for a moment too long. "We shouldn't." "But we already have." Kevin sat up, bringing their faces inches apart, his breath warm against Jason's skin. The space between them hummed with unspoken confessions. With need, Jason's self-control was unraveling, coming apart like the buttons Kevin slowly undid on his shirt, one by one, testing, waiting. "You have to stop tempting me," Jason growled, his voice thick, torn. Kevin smirked, leaning in, his lips grazing Jason's jaw. "Then stop wanting me." Jason's restraint snapped. In one swift movement, he had Kevin pinned against the bed, their bodies flush, their breaths heavy. It was dangerous, addictive, and neither of them wanted to stop. The illusion of control shattered one evening when Jason arrived home to find Kevin waiting for him in the dimly lit living room. The air was thick with anticipation, tension curling around them like smoke. Kevin stood by the fireplace, the soft glow of the flames casting flickering shadows across his sharp features. He had shed the usual pretense, standing there barefoot, in nothing but a pair of low-hanging sweatpants, his bare chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. Jason swallowed hard. "This isn't a good idea," he muttered, though his body betrayed him. Rooted in place, unable to retreat. Kevin took a step forward, his green eyes glinting with something dark. Something knowing. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice a velvet whisper. Another step. "You think putting space between us will make this go away?" Another. "It won't." Jason's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Kevin reached for him, fingers grazing his wrist before slipping up his forearm, trailing heat in their wake. Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I'm done pretending," Kevin murmured. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away." Jason should have told him, should have pulled away, but when Kevin pressed against him, warm and unyielding, Jason's resolve crumbled. With a low curse, he gripped the back of Kevin's neck, crushing their mouths together in a kiss that was all fire and surrender. There was no turning back now. The world beyond their walls remained blind to the truth. But within the sanctuary of their home, Kevin and Jason lived a reality no one else could touch. Time softened the once unbearable tension, molding their love into something undeniable. Something neither of them could, or wanted to, fight anymore. Years passed in secret, stolen moments evolving into an unspoken understanding. Kevin grew into a man with ambitions beyond the quiet town. And when it came time to choose his future, he didn't hesitate. He would stay close. Jason had feared the inevitable, feared Kevin leaving and feared even more what it would mean if he stayed. But when Kevin stood before him on the night of his college graduation, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, eyes filled with promise, Jason knew he had never had a choice in this. They were bound to each other in ways the world would never understand. As Kevin closed the distance between them, Jason didn't resist. There was no need anymore. "No regrets?" Kevin asked, his voice a hushed promise. Jason cupped his face, pressing their foreheads together, exhaling the last of his resistance. "Not a single one." And with that, their love, once whispered in the dark, became their truth, unshakable, unrepentant, and entirely theirs.